Prince Aemond Targaryen Origins, Bloodthirsty One-Eyed Kinslayer, Rider of Vhagar and Wannabe Daemon, explored. When we hear the word prince, we tend to think of a romantic, forlorn type of guy who would save a princess from a dragon and die saving her as well. But the reality is often sobering and depressing, and in the case of this particular prince, utterly terrifying. Westeros has seen its share of brave, noble, and just princes in the form of Aemon the Dragon Knight and Balon the Brave, but it has also seen its fair share of princes whose madness almost threatened to destroy the Seven Kingdoms. Prince Viserys Targaryen was about as mad as his father, the Mad King, if not more. Prince Aerion Brightflame drank wildfire in an attempt to turn into a dragon himself. Prince Daemon Targaryen's reputation was split down the middle. Half of the realm thought him daring and dashing, while the other half thought him arrogant and dangerous. And it is that last prince that the subject of our video both hates and tries to emulate. Prince Aemond Targaryen might have seemed like a scared, snotty brat when you first saw him, but after what happened last episode, it must be clear to you just how important this 10-year-old kid is going to be to House of the Dragon. So without further ado, let's check out his origins, and spoiler warning because there will be a lot of these in this video. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The significance of one-eyed characters in A Song of Ice and Fire. Characters with a single eye in George R.R. Martin's story usually serve one of two purposes. 1. As a reminder of the power of magic in his world, and 2. As a reminder of the ferocity of the individual who is being spoken of when looking at things from a purely combative standpoint. Some of the maddest soldiers and best sorcerers in the world of Ice and Fire tend to not have an eye, and in the rarest of instances, those two things overlap. While having a single eye is usually considered to be a problem by modern standards, in George's world, it is a sign of a fighter's deadliness in combat and their years of combat experience. In the main series, we meet a man called Mors Umber, a vassal of House Stark and the North. Mors Umber is an old man, easily above 60 years in age, and has a reputation as one of the strongest men to come out of the North. This grizzled veteran is one of the only Northern lords who have sworn their allegiance to King Stannis Baratheon, and already you can see the effects of his years of battle knowledge. Despite having an army mostly comprised of green boys and greybeards, he lays a successful trap for Roose Bolton's forces and kills Aenys Frey in the process, showing you just how ruthless a near 70-year-old man can be. Mors wears a polar bear's hide as a cloak for the love of the old gods. When we have Timett, son of Timett of the Burned Men, who burnt out his own eye to become one of the red hands of his clan of hill tribesmen. He is one of Tyrion Lannister's best fighters and intimidators, and is present when Grand Maester Pycelle is thrown in the Black Cells. These two are examples of one-eyed fighters whose injuries either reflect their experience or their madness. Then there are one-eyed characters whose missing eye is a sign of their magical prowess. The most prominent example of this from the overall lore is Brynden Rivers, aka Bloodraven, who was said to have one eye and 1,000. Lord Brynden was always thought to be a sorcerer even before he lost his eye. After that, his status as a practitioner of the dark arts was all but confirmed. Brynden allegedly used a glamour to disguise himself as Sir Maynard Plum and stop the Second Blackfyre Rebellion from even occurring. He is said to have used werewood arrows driven as much by skill as they were by sorcery to end the First Blackfyre Rebellion, where his raven's teeth showered arrows on the Blackfyre forces, killing Daemon Blackfyre and his sons Aegon and Aemon. Brynden would later be revealed to be the Three-Eyed Raven, who has been guiding Bran on his magical journey to north of the Wall, so there is no doubt that he is one of the most formidable magical forces in the known world. Not only has he lived for centuries, he also serves as a nexus point for the magic of the old gods and the Valyrians, being half Targaryen and half Blackwood. And another example of a character whose one-eyed depiction is tied into their very fabric is Euron Greyjoy. Now, Euron is not blind, but he does wear an eye patch over one of his eyes to hide its malice. Euron must have an eye with a few popped blood vessels, because the eye he shows to the world is called his smiling eye. bright, blue, and full of laughter. The eye he hides is called his blood eye, black as a crow's, which has earned him his nickname Crow's Eye. Euron Greyjoy in the books is nothing like what we got in the TV show, because there he is just a pirate lord who wants to sleep with the queen and kill a one-handed knight for some reason. In the books, he is a king who is already conquering, having taken over the Shield Islands with his Ironborn as he prepares to take Old Town in the Winds of Winter. The Forsaken is one of the most read sample chapters from that book, and in it we learn that Euron has gathered multiple priests from multiple regions and is apparently planning a massive blood sacrifice of some kind. He also possessed the Valyrian dragon horn called Dragonbinder, a tool that could have only be found in Valyria before the Doom, and has an armor that is allegedly made out of Valyrian steel, something that no one in the known world possesses. At the King's Moot, Euron had proudly proclaimed that he is the only living person to have sailed the smoking ruins of Valyria, and while Roderick Harlaw thinks otherwise, it is irrefutable that he has been someplace with a lot of sorcery going on. He is going to serve as one of the biggest antagonists in the endgame of the Song of Ice and Fire, and we personally can't wait to see how things shake out with him. There are many other characters whose single eye puts them squarely in one of these broad categories, even animals, but we think you get our point. The one thing that unites all of these people is the fact that their reputation is as black as sin. Crowfoot is a drunken brute, Timett is a crazed wildling, Bloodraven is a literal practitioner of the dark arts, and is possibly preparing Bran Stark for something horrific in the books, and Euron, well, it's quite simply the craziest bastard in the Seven Kingdoms. So when you hear Prince Aemond Targaryen being called Aemond One-Eye all over the internet without knowing what its significance is, well, you know now. So now that we have the meaning behind his nickname out of the way, let's take a look at him, shall we? He's the second son of a second queen, Prince Aemond Targaryen's birth and early years. Prince Aemond Targaryen was born in 110 AC to King Viserys Targaryen and his second queen, Alicent Hightower. At the time of his birth, Aemond was Viserys' fourth child to make it to infancy. He had two older siblings, Aegon and Helaena, and an older step-sibling in Rhaenyra Targaryen. Aemond was said to be half the size of his brother Aegon, but twice as fiery in temperament. His given name seems to be an amalgamation of a traditional Targaryen and Hightower name, as Aemon is the name that Viserys' late uncle bore, and Ormond is the name of Aemon's maternal uncle. We say this because there is no evidence of Aemond having been a traditional Valyrian name, and trust us, we looked. The young prince's birth itself was a cause for controversy, as Aemond was Viserys' second healthy son to make it beyond infancy, and yet he had not yet changed the line of succession. Rhaenyra remained his declared heir, and Alicent's children continued to be cheated out of their birthright. At this point, we think it's important to point out just why Alicent's claims did hold some merit. Westeros as a society used to be more equitable in its functioning. There is evidence of queens and high ladies ascending to various seats before the coming of the Andals, but after that, male inheritance became something of a given custom. It was agreed upon by most houses that followed the faith of the Seven that only male heirs had the right to inherit lands and titles, and for centuries, this was reinforced by their septons and septas. It was only when the Targaryens conquered the Seven Kingdoms that female inheritance once again started looking promising. The Targaryens themselves were the inheritors of the legacy of Old Valyria, and in the freehold of the Dragon Lords, no difference was made amongst their own race. Men and women could inherit based on pure primogeniture, with proximity only kicking in once the entire primary line has been exhausted. They also practiced voluntary polygamy and a bunch of other things that were considered taboo in Westerosi society. So when the Targaryens conquered it, they decided that they would show their realm they belonged there and started following Westerosi customs and laws in all regards save marriage. And even that was tenuous at best. For the first 50 years of Targaryen rule, succession issues were not even a major political headache because Aegon the Conqueror ruled for 37 out of those 50 years. The Dragon King's reign started off tumultuous and extremely violent, but by the time he reached the 37th year of his reign, Westeros was prospering so well that the previous 20 years of Aegon's rule were called the Dragon's Peace. After Aegon, his eldest son Aenys succeeded him, despite being his child through his younger wife Rhaenys. Aenys and his wife Alyssa Velaryon had 6 children altogether, out of whom 4 ended up becoming royal couples. Aenys' eldest son Aegon died at his uncle's hand, however, and his only issues were the twins Arya and Rhaella, so the matter of succession became a big dispute. This is where we see the custom clash come in, because Aenys' successor Maegor decided to favor primogeniture and named Arya his heir until a child was born to him. Maegor never ended up fathering a child from any of his 6 wives, and the rule of the realm passed over to a council of regents, who decided that he should be succeeded by his eldest living nephew, Jaehaerys, instead of his eldest living niece, grandniece, Arya. Things did not change much for Arya politically, because of this, as Jaehaerys was childless at the time, and she became his heir as well. But after Jaehaerys started working on his own brood, it became clear that the Targaryen dynasty would be firmly established within the patriarchy. Jaehaerys set the precedent of male inheritance with his own reign, twice passing over older female heirs in favor of a male heir. He did it to Princess Daenerys, his second-born child, and then to Rhaenys, his son Aemond's eldest and only living child. His insistence on male inheritance was the cause of 2 great quarrels between him and his queen, and also why the Great Council of 101 AC was convened. At that council, Rhaenys, her daughter Laena, and her son Laenor were passed over in favor of Viserys by the Lords of the Realm, clearly indicating that they preferred male inheritors over heiresses. Then King Viserys immediately defied this precedent by naming Rhaenyra his heiress, and never changing her standing even after the birth of his own male children. This is why it is so important to understand why Aegon and Aemond felt like they had been cheated out of their birthrights. By law, custom, and precedents, they should be the rightful heirs to the Iron Throne. And yet, Rhaenyra was the Princess of Dragonstone by royal decree, and had the sworn fealty of hundreds of lords from all across the realm. It's not like Prince Aemond got this idea himself, though in later years it would come out that his hatred for his nephew stemmed from his brother's revelation that they were bastards and the sons of Harwin Strong. Alicent's second son took after his elder brother when it came to his unforgiving nature, as Prince Aemond was not one to let a slight go by easily, but in everything else, he was for fiercer. Aemond was a bold and willful child, quick to anger and just plain wild. He had the hottest temper out of all of Alicent's brood, and the blood of the dragon was strong in him. Perhaps that is why Aemond took a special interest in tormenting his nephews. By royal decree, Alicent's 3 sons and Rhaenyra's 3 sons were made to spend time together. They would attend feasts, balls, tourneys together, study with the same maester, and learn combat from the same master-at-arms. King Viserys' hope was that this would make them grow closer, but in truth it only drove them further apart. By the time Aemond was 10, he shared the same resentment for his nephews that his mother and grandfather did, and it was about to get worse. We can assume that Aemond never received a dragon in the cradle because neither Viserys nor Alicent was a dragon rider, and until that point, only dragon riders had presented their children with eggs. In that regard, he was much like his brother Aegon and Helaena, neither of whom are reported to have received an egg in the cradle. This is in contrast to Rhaenyra's children, all of whom received eggs in their cradles, because their mother was a dragon rider, and Syrax was a she-dragon, and where Aemond differed from his siblings was in his traditional Valyrian steed, or the lack of one. Prince Aegon had claimed the young dragon Sunfire the Golden for his mount at the age of 13. His golden steed was born on Dragonstone a few years prior to his birth. Princess Helaena Targaryen had claimed for her mount the experienced she-dragon Dreamfire, who had been the mount of Queen Rhaena Targaryen before her, a woman who was married to 2 kings and outlived both of them. Even his younger brother Daeron, who was 6 years old when 120 AC came around, had bonded with the young Tessarion, also known as the Blue Queen, the swiftest of the younger generations of Targaryen dragons. So Aemond was the only one without a dragon, not just in his immediate family, but also his extended one, as all 3 of Rhaenyra's children's eggs hatched in the cradle. The year of the Red Spring started off with 1 dragonless prince and 2 great houses secure in their position and succession. By its end, only one of those 3 parties would see their fortunes rise. losing an eye, claiming Vhagar, and becoming the most dangerous man in the Seven Kingdoms, Prince Aemond the Terrible. The Year of the Red Spring claimed the lives of Lord Lionel Strong and Sir Harwin Strong, leaving Larry Strong as the final scion of House Strong. It also claimed the lives of Laena Velaryon and Sir Laenor Velaryon, with the latter being a particularly impactful death, as Laenor was prince consort to Rhaenyra and was to be the future king consort of Westeros. Lady Laena's death was a rather quiet affair, as she was the wife of the rogue Prince Aemond Targaryen. But Sir Laenor's death was attended by the royal family, and it is there that Aemond would earn his nickname and his steed. So far, Aemond had not made a move to claim a dragon for his own, despite being a bold and willful child by all accounts. So when Viserys was traveling to Driftmark with his family, he told his son that they could travel to Dragonstone next, where he could have his pick of eggs or hatchlings, if he was bold enough to do so. This pricked at Aemond's pride, and he decided to set his eyes on the biggest prize in the known world, Vhagar. After Laena Velaryon's death, Vhagar was riderless, and because she was bounded to her, a Velaryon, Vhagar was kept chained on Driftmark. Prince Aemond resolved to make his way to her stable in the dead of night and claim her with no one's knowledge, thinking he would get away with it. But he was spotted by his youngest nephew. 3-year-old Prince Joffrey Velaryon found his uncle trying to claim his recently deceased aunt's dragon and started protesting, but Aemond slapped his nephew and shoved him in dragon droppings to keep him quiet. He mounted Vhagar and flew 2 circles around Driftmark, establishing a dragon bond with the oldest and largest dragon in the land. But when he landed, his audience had grown from 1 to 3. Prince Jaehaerys and Lucerys Velaryon had learnt of his transgressions and decided to confront him. The 4 boys began fighting with wooden swords, and Aemond was holding his own even in a 3-on-1 situation. Then to add insult to injury, he called his nephews Strongs, and Jace, old enough to understand the insult, lunged at him. Aemond easily subdued his nephew and started battering him when Jace's younger brother Luke slashed at his uncle's face with a dagger, taking his eye out in the process. The incident caused a massive uproar in King Viserys' court, as Queen Alicent demanded an exact repayment of the debt Rhaenyra now owed to her. An eye for an eye. For her part, the princess demanded that Aemond be put to sharp questioning as to where he had heard her sons called Strongs. Sharp questioning being shorthanded for torture. King Viserys decided to entertain neither suggestion, but he did grill his son on where he had heard his nephews called that. Aemond reluctantly gave up Aegon, who only told his father that everyone in the realm knows. One has to only look at them. After that day, the unrelenting Prince Aemond would go on to say that he would consider losing an eye and gaining Vhagar in exchange was a fair trade, though in later years it would become clear he held a grudge anyway. Over the next 9 years, Prince Aemond would develop into a dangerous and proficient swordsman under the watchful eye of Lord Commander Criston Cole, who himself had bested Prince Daemon Targaryen in a tourney, twice. Aemond would put a sapphire in the socket where he lost his eye, though he would also wear an eye patch on formal occasions, so as to spare the ladies of the court the horror that his face had become. He would also commission an armor for himself, night black, chest with gold, and the perfect representation of his vanity and menacing nature. In 127 AC, at the royal feast celebrating the birth of Prince Maelor, he would mock his cousins as 3 strong boys, and by the time the Dance of the Dragons broke out, Aemond was poised to show the world that he was the greatest dragon rider that had ever lived. The perception does not matter. During the Dance of the Dragons, while Aegon was fixated on his half-sister Rhaenyra, Aemond would make his brother-in-law/uncle Daemon his primary target. Daemon was the rider of Caraxes the Bloodworm, the meanest dragon to ever be born in the dragon pit of King's Landing, and Aemond was the rider of Vhagar, who by this point was as large as Balerion was when Aegon conquered the Seven Kingdoms. The 2 dragon lords marked each other for death, though it quickly became clear who was the more strategic out of the 2 of them. Aemond would become the centerpiece of the battle strategies for both sides, because as the rider of Vhagar, he was the biggest threat on the field. Aemond and his mighty mount turned the battle in the favor of the Greens multiple times over. He struck the first blow of the dance descending upon Vhagar's back on one of his nephews, and forever being tainted as a Kinslayer thereafter, though his brother greeted him with a great feast after. He was the deciding factor in one of the first proper dragon against dragon battles of the dance, and was the direct cause of death for one of the Blacks' most important commanders and allies. When his brother became inactive, Aemond took on the title of Prince Regent and Protector of the Realm, and was later known to have said the crown of Aegon the Conqueror suited him better than his brother. He would remind the Riverlands of the terrors of Maegor the Cruel's reign, burning multiple black-aligned keeps multiple times over, earning himself the nickname Terror of the Trident. In the end, Aemond went down dealing with the man he had marked out as the biggest single threat on Rhaenyra's side, and that is the fight that this entire series is building up to as far as we are concerned. But speaking of the series, let's talk a bit about House of the Dragon, shall we?
Do not mourn me, mother. It was a fair exchange. I may have lost an eye, but I gained a dragon.
He's Alicent's youngest son and is obsessed with dragons. Prince Aemond Targaryen in House of the Dragon. Prince Aemond Targaryen immediately made a fiery impression on us when we met him in Episode 6, and that only increased in Episode 7. Aemond is the third youngest and most likely the last child that Alicent Hightower will give birth to in the series, which is a damn shame, because we wanted to see Daeron and Tessarion, but we don't make the rules here. In the 10 years that he has been alive, he has been treated like a plaything by his elder brother Aegon, who likes to bully Aemond alongside his strong nephews. You can tell that they routinely drag on him because in the scene where Jace is learning to command Vermax, after he is done with his training, Aegon instigates a prank on Aemond that riffs off his lack of a dragon. He, Jace, and Luke put wings and a tail on a pig on Aegon's command and present it to Aemond as his new mount, the Pink Dread. An embarrassed Prince Aemond then tries to claim one of the dragons in the dragon pit, but thinks better of it when Dreamfire loses her flames on him. Aemond is seemingly obsessed with dragons, as he has tried to claim dragons that already have riders in the past. Dreamfire, for example, was his sister Helena's dragon, and she is the one who points out what Aemond has been up to when he is brought in front of Alicent for his dangerous adventure. The queen admonishes her youngest for his obsession with dragons, but visibly relents when he tells her how they all mocked him for being dragonless. Then in Episode 7, Aemond decides that if he has to have a dragon, he will claim the biggest one in all the kingdoms, and steals Vhagar at Laena Valerion's funeral. The fight between him and Jace and Luke is different from the books in that instead of Joff, Baela and Rhaena are involved, and the fallout is also not exactly what happened in the books, but as the series continues, you will see that Aemond is modeling himself after the one man whom he has targeted for a long time, Prince Daemon. Aemond hates his brother for being a bully, it's clear as day, and that is what will fuel him into thinking he can be a better king than Aegon when he does become Prince Regent. His viciousness is going to be unparalleled when the training session we have been seeing in the trailers with a grown Aemond and Sir Criston comes to pass in the series. And the best part of this? It appears as though Aemond will get to hit all his major highs and lows from the books, and that includes a certain fiery sorceress who will later become the Witch Queen of Harrenhal. For more on her, go check out our Alice Rivers video. Aemond Targaryen and Daemon Targaryen will form a fiery heart, no pun intended, King Stannis of House of the Dragon. And honestly, all we can say is, grow up faster, young prince, grow up faster. The legacy of Prince Aemond Targaryen. Though he was famed amongst his supporters in the Greens, Prince Aemond was not loved by the people and would end up accruing a worse reputation than Daemon Targaryen. He was already resented when the Civil War broke out, and every subsequent action of his ensured that that perception remained the same. He killed his own kin, tried to rise above his king, burned the Riverlands to ashes, and fought in the last proper battle between two dragon riders in the Battle Above the God's Eye. It's said that Prince Aemond's body was recovered with his opponent's weapon still embedded on his person, and honestly, most people thought he deserved it. Though his life began with great promise and joy, by its end, Prince Aemond would only be remembered as the Terror of the Trident and one of the worst Targaryen princes to have ever lived. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.